Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Thought leadership. No, hang on, wait a minute. Not just thought leadership, intentional, well-crafted thought leadership. This thing needs a name. I know. How about Thoughtcraft? And I have the king of Thoughtcraft himself, Mr. Jeff Craven. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, David. Thanks for having that. That's quite an introduction. I'll try to live up to it.
Well, let's just start with the whole Jeff Craven story. How did you come to do the work that you're doing today, and what were some interesting pit stops along the way?
Oh, okay. So I started my career out of college as a graphic designer. One of my first jobs was I went and worked with a business advisory firm. It was called the Balanced Scorecard Collaborative. Some people might remember that.
Sure.
Anyway, so people would bring me stuff to make pretty, right? So decks and brochures and all that jazz that their sales team could take out and into the market. And so I made the mistake one day of reading something that somebody brought to me and said, "Guys, this doesn't make any sense at all. I don't know what you're trying to say." And then they challenged me, said, "Okay, if you're so good, why don't you rewrite it?" I said, "Fine, I will." And I did. It was a direct mail piece for their BD team to increase appointments. I did, and their appointments went up 9%. I was like, I'm onto something here, I think. So I gradually transferred from doing all graphic design to doing all copy, so marketing copy and also thought leadership content as well. And so I went on to go to work for Palladium Group and then on to work for World 50, which is an executive peer-to-peer network, and did all their content, all their marketing. That World 50 was bought by another company. And so I was made redundant, figured, okay, might as well go it on my own now. And the rest is history. I've been working with and helping consulting firms with their messaging for about a dozen years now.
So tell us about that transition, because that's always fascinating. Going from practitioner, where you are responsible for doing the work, but not responsible for selling the work, to full-on entrepreneurship, where it's like, oh, I have to now sell this and deliver it also.
Yeah.
What was that transition like for you? And was it rocky? Was it bumpy? Was it smooth? Tell us about it.
Well, I think my journey probably mirrors a lot of, solo consultants out there, in which, at first I had a lot of referrals, I had a lot of people that knew me, and it, I was actually doing better than I was when I was actually working for somebody else. But then eventually, of course, things change. People, move positions, and I had to figure out how to package up my stuff. Like I'm the messaging guy, right? It's like the cobblers that, children have those shoes. So I had to figure out how to package up my stuff and sell it. And that was an interesting transition. Relationships definitely helped a lot, but getting to the point where I could build those meant I had to really figure out and clarify, hey, what is it I'm bringing to the table here? What are the problems I'm actually solving? What transformations am I promising? Figuring all that out it wasn't fun at first. And it changes over time, right? That was definitely the very first step in making that transition of becoming, I'm actually able to fill all those roles that you described. Does that make sense?
Sure. So when the natural pipeline sort of dried up, tell us about waking up one day and, I got to build some new relationships. Did you go to conferences? Yeah. Were you writing articles? Did you go on LinkedIn? How did you start priming the pump and getting the prospecting engine going?
I called everybody I knew. I reached out to everybody I knew, and I began interviewing them about, hey, here's an idea I have about this XYZ problem. Does that resonate with you? Is that helpful? Where am I going wrong? What should I change? Does this line up with how the world actually works, right? Actually, just from doing that, I got a client, this is back in 2014. I got a client I'm still working with on a regular basis from just doing that.
From the interview strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But you were very intentionally, it sounds like you were very intentionally interviewing the exact prospects that you wanted to do business with, which is the owners of boutique consulting firms.
Yeah, or people that are in either managing partners or they're marketing officers at larger firms.
Got it. Okay. And so I have to ask you, because of course this is a show about sales and selling. You're doing something that is both very controversial and some would say very smart, which is the evergreen question: should I put prices on my website? No, don't put prices on your website. That's a terrible idea. Always put prices on your website. It disqualifies the tire kickers, the goofballs, the goobers, and the idiots who are going to waste your time. So we're not going to name the prices because after this interview, I know your prices are going up. But what was the decision-making criteria that you used to say, you know what? Listen, here's what it is. This costs this. Middle package costs that. Super deluxe is over here. I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to wait for people to call and waste my time and waste their time. What was the decision-making process that said, put prices on the website?
I thought about how I feel when I'm going and looking at prices and services, or I'm looking at services or products or whatever it is online, and how frustrated I get when I can't find the information I'm looking for. And price is, a very, very specific, very critical part of the decision in a lot of cases, especially when you're going to make an investment like in my services. So I came to it from that point of view and trying to empathize with the person that is looking into this. And also give them a sense of, I do want to disqualify people that aren't ready to make that kind of investment or don't recognize the power of doing that. So it was two things. It's funny because I was talking to somebody else and they were definitely in the camp of you should take those off your site and what have you. So, I'm now rethinking like, okay, what should it be? And one place I came to was, maybe it's not the exact price, but it's, hey, it starts at this, right? It starts at this price if you want this. And that both gives them an idea of what to expect and also disqualifies people that aren't quite ready yet.
Are you loving this interview as much as I am? Holy smokes. Hey, you know what this reminds me of? There's a fantastic sales book that you got to get your hands on right here, right now. It's called Do It Selling. How do I know it's great? Well, I wrote it. And you need to read it. Pop over right now to doitselling.com. Now, back to our interview. I want to just dig a little bit deeper into this because I think it is a brave and big decision. Have you had clients say to you, Jeff, you know what? The reason I called, I love that you have the prices on the website. I know the range of investment. Let's talk about the how, the what, the details, the specifics. Price is fine. I just want to make sure this is a good fit for us, etc. So have you gotten positive feedback that prospects are calling because it's not a mystery?
Actually, no one has ever mentioned the prices being on my site it's never really come up.
How about that?
But what hasn't happened is I haven't had people, go to my site, reach out to me, and then say, wait, your prices are what?
Right.
No. So they've already qualified themselves by the time they reach out to me, I know this is going to be worth my time, right?
Right.
Which is exactly what we want.
Now, the other final piece of this that I'm really curious about is you've got service 1, service 2, service 3. In your case, it's packages, but it could be services. There, package 1, package 2, package 3. Is that the only way that you work with your clients, or are those just the 3 primary ways? And there's a whole range of other things that you simply did not want to confuse the messaging with?
Yeah, it is definitely more the latter. I just didn't want to confuse, typically when people come to me, they are in that first package range.
Yeah.
Because they need to figure out how the heck do we talk about what we do? How do we put this in ways that is not going to make people's eyes glaze over? And it sounds like every other consultant, on the planet. Every engagement that I have involves some form of that. So it was mostly just, hey, I want, one, I don't want to make it too confusing. And two, I want to make sure it's known. There's that piece of it, that brand message strategy is just the first step. There's much more that can be done after that.
Mm-hmm. Now we're going to have some real fun, because now we're going to talk about what do consulting
you already having
firms...
fun. Yeah, go ahead.
I know this has been tremendous. It totally has. But we're going to have some fun because we're going to really kind of figure out what the heck is wrong with the consulting industry. Boutique consulting firm comes to you, says, Jeff, we need the whole enchilada. No one understands what the hell we do. We're getting price shopped left and right. Less capable firms are landing bigger deals than we are because we don't have the visibility, the credibility, and the clarity. So talk to me about sort of like the before, the nightmare picture with a consulting firm that just has blah, 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 vanilla messaging, or even worse, confused, jargon-filled messaging. Mm-hmm. What are the symptoms? What are the costs of having those problems? What do they kind of come to you with a bleeding neck about?
That's a great question, and there's a lot to it. I'll answer it by telling a story. That's usually my favorite way to do it. So I had a firm come to me. I don't know if they necessarily to like 100 people in the firm. They came to me and they wanted, hey, we need really great copy for our website. We really want it to sparkle. I said, okay, great. Well, what's your position? What's your messaging position? Your brand position? I said, okay, well, this is what we came up with. And it was an absolute train wreck. And the main problem was they were trying to stuff as many ideas into this message as possible. And they were saying so much that they couldn't communicate anything. So I went in and I said, look, I can't write copy for this site using this brand message. You want it to sparkle? It's not going to sparkle if we use this. And I showed them, like, here are all the different ideas you're putting out, and you're not even resolving them. You're bringing up, I've probably heard about open loops and how that's used. And
yes.
And so they're opening up all these loops and not closing them, or closing loops they didn't open, before. So it was, trying to make a longer story short, it was the reality of, a brand message created by committee and no one willing to kill darlings. So I convinced them, look, we need to focus on one idea. And we went through that process of killing all those darlings and finding that one idea. From there, we were able to come up with their message that would translate onto their site. And once they put that up on their site, within 60 days, they attracted 2 Fortune 50 companies, like companies they'd never worked with, that specifically mentioned their message as the reason for them reaching out.
Yeah.
So that process of killing all those darlings can be very painful.
Yeah.
But it's so worth it.
Tell us about all of the places and applications of this messaging structure. So obviously, the website is one of those places.
Sure.
I'm guessing this also impacts what they put on LinkedIn, as far as the principals, the managing directors, the CEOs' profiles. If they have a company page on LinkedIn, what's on the company page on LinkedIn? This would probably also affect some internal and external communication. What kind of emails do they send out? What are they emailing about? What subjects? What topics? If they have a blog or a thought leadership repository with some articles, I'm imagining some of that stuff's going to stay. Some of that stuff's going to go. Some of that stuff may need to be rewritten. So where else besides the website does this have a ripple effect?
Let me just say from the get-go, the most important parts have nothing to do with the site.
Okay.
So the most important impact, in my opinion, is confidence levels. If they're people, if the managing partner or the team or whatever, whoever's running this consultancy, whether it's one person or 500 people, if they're not clear on their message and what they bring to the table, the market perceives that as a lack of value, right? They perceive that lack of clarity as a lack of value. The difference in confidence levels is, in my opinion, like worth it 10, 100 times over. Because when you have that confidence, you're more likely to go out and take action and get results. The other is the cost of client acquisition goes way down, right? And then it's easier to attract talent. So these are all things that don't necessarily have to do anything with the website. It has to do, if you have a message that is clear and resonates, it's so much easier for the entire firm to line up with it and use it and go out and kill it in the market.
Yeah.
Now, as far as stuff like the actual collateral is concerned, yeah, sure, it can show up on your LinkedIn and all your socials, but it also shows up in your whatever you use to drive leads. So it could be a webinar, it could be maybe it's a white paper, and then it shows up in your any kind of event that you run or what have you. One critical piece of the message, which is hard to kind of wrap your head around, is what wrong does your firm right? What does it put right? What's the philosophical problem that you are going to solve? What's the value that's driving you, and what problem you're going to solve because of that, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole Simon Sinek thing, right? Is people buy why you do it, and you're going to attract those same kind of people that believe those same things.
Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing part of this messaging strategy is not just putting lipstick on a pig. So you gave a great example that, hey, if this is where you're going, I can't copyright to that because it's a whole jumbled mess anyway. Let's look at a very narrowly, very specifically, very well-defined consulting firm. I'm going to just pick a crazy example. These are supply chain consultants in the shipbuilding industry. That's all they do, right? There's a lot of supply chain consultants that will work in any industry. There's a lot of shipbuilding industry consultants that solve a lot of different kind of problems. You want to be the go-to firm for the supply chain series of problems in the shipbuilding industry around the world. When your clients come to you, do you encourage them to say, listen, you might do other things and you might work in other arenas, but this is your superpower. This is your strength. This is where you've got the best names to drop and the best stories to tell. Let's build everything around this and make you the drop dead specialist. And if other stuff comes along the side, it's the 80-20 rule, right? I'm never going to say turn down a check, but you're blowing all these opportunities by actually being a specialist and pretending you're a generalist.
Yeah, 100%. And that can be a tough conversation to have.
So you've helped them kind of fly their freak flag and acknowledge that, you know what, Jeff is right. We got to own this piece.
Yeah. So I had a guy that came to me. He was a consultant, super brilliant guy. He works in the electricity market space. So he helps electricity market participants, specifically in Ireland.
Yeah.
And he was helping them transform their operations so that they can comply with all the carbon regulations there and do it profitably. His message was all about like his process and the technology and the this and that and the other. But I'm like, when we figured out in talking to him, I'm thinking, okay, what you're doing is you're helping these market participants thrive in a zero carbon economy. So why not just say that? Because that is what you're doing. It's taking all the mess of like, nobody cares about your process. Nobody cares about your framework. Nobody cares about your philosophy. Before they care about what are you going to help, what transformation are you going to help me do, right? What can I be with you that I can't be without you? So yes, totally 100%. You got to pick a lane. You got to pick a very specific lane if you want to stand out. Like if there's a fire that's already building, let's just throw gas on that fire and then let that pay for any future ventures that you that you want to do.
Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. So in addition to being a brilliant strategist and a skilled copywriter and having all of this background, I know that one of the tools in your toolkit is the StoryBrand framework and structure. For people that don't know StoryBrand or kind of how it relates to this kind of strategic messaging, give us just kind of the basic 101, kind of what is in that tool set, how do you use it, how do you help clients both simplify and amplify their message using that particular framework?
Yeah. So the StoryBrand was a method developed by Donald Miller, who wrote the book, Creating a StoryBrand. I'm a certified StoryBrand guide. And it's a framework that uses the same structure as stories do in order to communicate a message. We are just hardwired for stories. Stories stick in our brains because for some reason, that's how we have evolved and they're enduring. So it uses that same structure to set the person you're speaking to, set them up as the hero, set them up as the focus, and then walks them through the transformation and the stakes, what's at stake, what are the challenges. This is not in StoryBrand, but what I've added to it is the specific mechanism. So if you think about Star Wars, when Luke meets Obi-Wan, the guide, so in this case, the hero, Luke, is your client, is the person you want to attract. And you yourself are Obi-Wan, you're the guide, right? And Obi-Wan gives Luke a lightsaber, this mechanism for which to complete his quest. So that all those same elements of that story arc are in this messaging strategy. And it really works because it is using basically the same framework as we use when we tell each other stories.
Yeah, very, very powerful. Let's talk about some of the sales challenges that the firms have when they don't have the crystal clear messaging and specificity and so forth. Now, clearly, depending on the business that they're in, I mean, I kind of guess that some of them just get lucky and they have some recurring contracts and they have some long-standing things. But the symptoms would be they're not growing fast enough. They have a real hard time winning pitches for new business. They don't like selling because they probably don't like their story, or no one can tell the story the same way twice. What are some of the frustrations in the sales arena or the business development arena that these firms are suffering and might not even know that it's a messaging problem? They think, oh, Bob sucks at sales, or Fred is terrible at marketing, or something like that. And then you look at it and you're like, well, guys, no one could sell this with what you have out here in the public eye.
Yeah, well, a lot of it traces back to the things we've already talked about, putting too many ideas into trying to communicate too many ideas, which belies a lack of focus, a lack of direction, where they want to go. And not having confidence enough in their main value. Just go, like you said, let their freak flag fly. That's hard to say fast.
Yes, it is.
And a lot of times they're focusing on themselves, right? They're talking about how great they are, how great they're, how smart they are. And this is something that really bugs me. They are smuggling their solution into the description of the problem. So if you imagine you walk into a doctor's office, right, with a pain in your knee, and you notice the doctor has this big display of knee ointment for sale. It's their own brand of knee ointment. And when you go in to see her, before you finish explaining what's wrong, she says, hey, you know what? The problem is that you don't have an effective ointment to rub into your knee. And you're like, well, what would you think at that point? Even if she's right,
you're here to pitch me the ointment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you feel like you're a mark, instead of someone she's generally trying to help. So consultancies do the same thing when they say something to the effect of, hey, you're struggling to do X because you don't have a, synergized framework or an integrated method or whatever other consulting and they want to throw at them. And how convenient. We happen to have to, one of those to sell to you.
Right.
They don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence, but they absolutely do. A lot of what I'm hearing right now is they'll bring in people from outside the firm. Like some of these firms are able to promote from within, right? They're elevating, they bring in kind of the analyst, and then they move up into more the senior director and then maybe the managing director, right?
Yeah.
And that's the ideal. But, like I said, they want to grow faster. They don't have the capacity to do that. So they bring people from outside the firm into the firm. And a lot of times they don't have a lot of luck with those folks selling the work. They're doing the work, but they don't have a lot of luck in actually, making it rain.
Right.
So, and having a story that's hard for them to understand and them to resonate with, just makes that much more difficult. So that's one of the issues that I see a lot of.
So when you're working with them, they have all these assets, they have a crystal clear message, they have the confidence that you said that is the drop dead number one result of this is confidence and clarity to actually go out there and talk about what you do in a way that's compelling. Do you ever get pulled into some like sales training or, hey, can you help us win this pitch or win this client? Or, we're whale hunting and Jeff, we need something to land this whale because it's going to make our year. And how do you handle that if you do get pulled in?
That hasn't happened much lately. It did happen earlier in my, my venture. Yeah, they'd come and say, okay, we need to translate this into a deck, right, that we're going to use for this specific pitch. But that hasn't happened to me much lately, just because I think, thankfully, by the time we've gotten done with the work of getting their message down, translating that into a deck or whatever they want to do is not that difficult for them. So if they come to me and ask me to do that, it's typically because we just don't have the bandwidth.
Right. And really, the whole point of this process of working with you is the old metaphor about teaching them to fish rather than giving them the fish.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So this is going to be a long-term capability and competency that they now have for the rest of that firm's lifespan.
Yeah, or until the market changes and they need to adapt their message accordingly.
Totally fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, where can we point people if they want more Thoughtcraft mojo and more Jeff Craven brilliance? What are some links that we can share in the show notes?
Yeah, so my site is Thoughtcraft. So thought is in thinking, then craft.co. So not .com, it's .co. And they can also find me on LinkedIn. Just look up Jeff Craven and Thoughtcraft and I should pop up. There's also, if they want to check out on my site, there's a guide they can download. It's called The 5 Keys to Standing Out in Today's Consulting Market. And it walks people through 5 steps to create the message that we're talking about, the one that elevates confidence levels, lowers the cost of client acquisition, and attracts talent. And of course, the opportunities you need to grow your firm.
Perfect. And links to all of those things are directly one click away directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Jeff Craven, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for all the value bombs that you shared with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.